Hi, everyone. So we get to the final session. It's all about payments. Payments is really core to the airline retail experience. I think it's around 2 billion transactions take place every year. So being a global industry, it's quite complex. So I'm going to hand over to Thierry Stucker, the Director of Industry Payment Programs, to explain us a little bit more. To you, Thierry.
Thank you, Julius, and good afternoon to everybody. So I'm very conscious that we are the last session of the day, so I'll try to be on point and informative. So we have three main topics that we are going to cover. So first of all, the importance of passenger customer payments, so both in terms of volumes you are going to see and the cost for airlines. We are going to share also some key findings on payment issues we have found and new trends, and what could be solutions to address them. So we do an airline industry payment cost study refresh every 2 to 3 years with the company Edgar Dunn Company. So the data I'm going to share actually from our latest edition, which was in 2024, and those data are based on 2023 data. It's quite complex actually to do it, so this is why we don't do it so often. So as we share right now, so airlines are processing almost $1 trillion of payment value in their payment system, which is obviously key to the cash flow of the airlines. $1 trillion is really huge in terms of value, and you think that this has to go flawless actually in those systems. So out of this $1 trillion, roughly 80% is related to passenger revenue, which includes ancillaries. But airline also collects all kinds of charges. And a big part are actually related to government taxes, and yes, and airport charges. So roughly 91 billion. So which obviously those parties expect to be paid on time. But actually it's the airline who pick up the cost of the payment. And as Julius was mentioning, you can also think about it in terms of number of transactions, which is roughly 2 billion of number of transactions per year. So you can imagine that the smallest process issue repeated across hundreds of millions of transactions impact both the customer experience and revenue and cost. So it's very sensitive. So we are now going to look at areas where things are not working very well, and the impact they create on cost of payment and revenue loss, the impact they have on reliability of the payment option. But unfortunately, the world does not stop while we look at those issues, and we're also seeing that customer preferences are changing, which creates, if you want, a double challenge for airlines. So first, let's start with payment cost. So the $1 trillion I've just mentioned cost the airlines $22 billion per year. Of which 18 billion are related to payment fees. And here I'm going to define a notion that we are going to use throughout. So what is a payment instrument? So a payment instrument is the thing you use to pay. It can be banknotes, that's the most obvious one. It can be a debit card, a credit card, a payment wallet. So these are payment instruments. So 18 billion is the cost of processing these payment instruments. And in addition to this $18 billion, $4 billion are related to the airline own operating cost. So think about payment system, adapters, compliance, and so on. Another way to look at this $22 billion is we looked at how much related to consumer and how much relates to corporate. So consumer payment costs roughly 15 billion out of the 22, and corporate payment costs roughly 7 billion. And to make these figures more tangible, the industry net profit is equivalent from, let's say, in the range of $7 to $8 per passenger. You have probably seen in other presentations. And the payment cost is roughly $4 per passenger. So we are living in actually a very razor-thin margin industry, which means that airlines don't have the choice to innovate in payment to both to increase their revenue and decrease the cost. It's not either or, it's both. So on the flip side, we contributed to a McKinsey research in 2022, and here there were some interesting key findings, which were that if airlines include payment in their commercial strategy, they can create by 2030 $14 billion of value. So which is both driven by increasing the customer reach. So what is the customer reach? Is accepting basically the payment instrument of choice of the customer, reducing friction and cost savings opportunities. So secondly, let's look at the customer experience. We do, probably you know, every year a global passenger survey, and these results come time and again. So customers are facing actually noticeable payment issues, which is leading actually to customer dissatisfaction and revenue loss for airlines. So so that's the third point on passenger payment option preferences. So obviously, physical cards are still the main form of payment that customers are using. But other options, and we see this trend increasing, towards instant payment and digital wallet are growing. And we observe also that payment habits and preferences vary significantly by region. So if you think, for example, about North America, where the main payment instrument is probably a debit or a credit card, and if you go to Asia, where actually the main forms of payment or the favorite ones are payment wallets. But what was also interesting is we found that age group have very different, so within the same continent, they have very different expectations. So I'm going to take the example of my own family. So I have two children, they are both in their 20s, so call them young adults. And we counted the other day that in the family, we use 7 different payment instruments. Actually, there are some that they use and I don't use, and vice versa. And actually, we don't use them, we don't use the same all the time. It depends on the situation. The young generation, which we found very interesting, is digital first. They have little patience, so that you can also try at home. So they want it to work, and they will trade convenience for any other capability. Whereas, for example, my generation age class will go for more the sense of security. So now we are going to see what are some of the underlying issues and what could be the solutions. And what I'm going to show you are the results of an airline payment expert working group that we are leading, and these were the findings from the payment expert of the airlines. Okay, so first of all, let's start with standards. So standards are these invisible things that everybody assumes they work, but actually what happens if they do not fulfill their intended purpose anymore? So something you may not know is that the current payment messages are based on standards that were developed in 1987 and with a similar technology. They have been the workhorse of the payment industry for 40 years. And if you think about it, that's quite remarkable. But one of the problems is that this standard, after a while, was not maintained, and every payment actor started to drift away from this standard over the time, and it's not maintained anymore. So the situation we are now in is that this created the need for airlines to have many translation layers, tools, and data are getting lost. So I can give you examples. So because the old format only can support a certain length, data are truncated, or they are not even transmitted because they are literally lost in translation. So for example, that can impact a payment authorization. And that definitely impacts the customer experience and leads to inefficiency and additional costs. So we have been working recently with an association which is called the Nexo Association, and they have developed, starting 10 years ago, a new ISO standard for payment messages. And this is developed between bank, card schemes, and merchant, and it's actually maintained in a very lively fashion. And this standard is already implemented in 31 countries, and they are referencing roughly 5 billion payment transactions as we speak. So this is twice, if you want, the airline industry, more than twice. And basically, we are now working with airline members and other payment actors to assess the standard for the airline industry. And obviously, if we want to implement it, this is a whole ecosystem that needs to change. One airline alone cannot do it. It requires all the payment actors to be part of it, and also because of the interconnected nature of our industry, let's say many people need to move together. What I can already share is that the preliminary results of these standards are very promising, and we did not find any showstopper. So we also saw just before that customers have changing needs. But actually, something also that is very concerning is that airlines face all sorts of challenges once they want to implement a new payment instrument. So all the airlines we talked to said that it takes 9 to 12 months to implement one payment instrument in one market. And obviously, that's a bespoke implementation. So which is obviously slowing airlines in adopting those new payment methods, and it's difficult for them to meet the basically demand of the customers. So that, and therefore they cannot reduce the transactional and operational cost. What I'd like also to share is that, so IATA launched a few years ago a service for its airline member that's called IATA Pay. It actually helps the airline to implement instant payment solution at a fraction of the cost of what is happening today. So for example, IATA Pay is implemented already in 36 countries and in several continents. On the other hand, the Nexus standard is also supporting emergent payment methods. So for example, even though they started on card payment messages, they are now also integrating from this year instant payment facility in the same messages. And they plan to add new payment instruments in the future. So the ultimate goal, if you think about it, would be the dream, is that at some stage, implementing a payment instrument is almost plug and play. And probably for the last point, which may surprise you, one of the major drivers of innovation are the central banks themselves. So if you think about the digital yuan that was introduced a couple of years ago in China, PIX in Brazil, which made really the news also very recently, and the European Central Bank that is moving on with its digital project. So why is that interesting? Because it's not going to happen very fast, but they have a scale definitely to make an impact. So these are definitely movements we should look towards. So the final point is about our corporate customers. So corporate travel was also developed in the 1980s, and I must say it was merely a copy-paste from the consumer process, both in terms of distribution and payment. And as mentioned previously, today it's currently a payment cost of roughly $7 billion. But unlike other industries, we don't have a business-to-business industry purchase flow. So to address that, in 2025, business-to-business procurement flow work completely differently. So if you think, for example, when your company is purchasing a laptop for you, they create a purchase order, they receive an invoice, and they pay by an inexpensive bank transfer. And as an additional benefit, you don't have to do anything about it. But if you look at the corporate flow for airline flights, it does not work this way. So when you will go back home from this trip, you have probably to file an expense report. But imagine that if you would have a procurement flow in place, this will be all sorted for you. And actually, implementing a procurement flow will also drive a lot of automation and benefits from a corporate client. So we are proceeding in step by step. So last year, which we made public, we tested successfully a proof of concept with the Lufthansa Group to look at how we can automate payment. And that was done for live tickets with one of their corporate clients. This year, we are moving to looking at how a procurement flow could work end-to-end from an airline to a corporate. in a fully automated fashion, and leveraging the enterprise resource planning, or ERP for short, of the corporate client. So in conclusion, we believe that the time has come to start retiring. Obviously that's going to take time, but to start retiring the old standards and to move to new and innovative both standards and processes. And basically with the airlines, we'll assess that will drive better customer experience, reduce friction, and reduce cost, and bring basically benefits for airlines and their customers. So,
thank you, Thierry. If there's any questions in the room?
Yeah.
Yes.
So I'd like to know what contributions, if any, the big system in Brazil had to you, to the system you were developing.
So, you mean IATA Pay?
Yeah.
Yeah. So let me see. So I'm not the product manager of IATA Pay, but we can get back to you on that, whether it has been integrated. But in many different countries, so 36, we have already implemented, but the peaks went really fast and is extremely popular in Brazil, as you may follow.
So we'll come back. We'll come back with a specific answer on that as well. Any other questions in the room? Grant?
Why does it take airlines so long to implement new payment methods, given that it's probably a matter of paperwork rather than technology a lot of the time, or is it?
Yeah, so from the study we did with the airlines, basically there are three things that are difficult for airlines. So first of all is they have to do a business case. They have, let's say, legal aspects, which is different from every payment instrument to the other. But secondly, the technical implementation is very long. So it's a bespoke implementation every time for each payment instrument. So it's not like you have, let's say, one standard and you just can plug in a product. So this is why we're actually working. If those messages could be standardized, it does not solve everything, but this technical part would take much less time. And actually many airlines are kind of hesitating in implementing a new payment instrument because they may not know if it will pick up. So it's quite an investment to implement. So if it would be shorter, they can test. If it does not work, they just pull out.